Sometimes the most profound connections are born in moments when strangers become saviors, and a single act of courage can rewrite two incomplete stories into one whole. This video will tug at your heartstrings. Witness the incredible moment when a single dad's compassion and quick thinking turned a terrifying situation into a life-saving experience, leaving him with a lasting bond with a grateful mother and a newfound purpose. The autumn rain fell in sheets across the industrial skyline, washing away the grime that had settled on windshields overnight. It was the kind of rain that made metal sing, and inside his weathered garage, Caleb Monroe could hear it drumming against the corrugated roof like distant applause. His hands, calloused and permanently stained with engine grease, worked methodically on the transmission of a 1998 Chevy. There was a certainty in fixing engines that Caleb found comforting. Problems had solutions, broken parts could be replaced, and, with enough patience, anything mechanical could be made whole again. People were different, people stayed broken. At 38, Caleb's face carried the quiet dignity of someone who had seen enough of life to respect its unpredictability. The fine lines around his eyes deepened when he smiled, which wasn't often these days. Not since Sarah. 5 years had passed since the medical error that took his wife. A routine procedure, they'd said. A complication no one could have foreseen. Except Caleb, with his military medical training, had known better. Palin had met his Marrier in his... He'd recognized the symptoms too late, had rushed her to the hospital where professional courtesy and bureaucracy had cost precious minutes. Minutes that might have saved her. "Dad?" The small voice pulled him from the familiar spiral of his thoughts. "Ms. Jenkins says I need this permission slip signed by tomorrow." Josie stood in the doorway, 7 years old and already so much like her mother. The same determined chin, the same intelligent eyes that seemed to absorb everything. She held out a crumpled piece of paper, her backpack still slung over one shoulder. "Let me just clean up," Caleb said, wiping his hands on a rag that had once been white. It was Thursday, which meant they'd have to take the subway downtown for Josie's weekly checkup. The diabetes that had appeared in his daughter just months after her mother's death felt like life's cruelest joke. As if taking Sarah wasn't enough, now he had to watch their daughter navigate a lifelong condition. The clock on the wall, perpetually 5 minutes slow, showed 4:30. If they hurried, they could make the 5:15 train, be at the doctor's by 6, and maybe grab dinner at that diner Josie liked before heading home. Routine was their anchor now. "How was school?" Caleb asked as he locked up the garage. Monroe Auto Repair wasn't much, but it was his, and it allowed him the flexibility to be there for Josie when she needed him. "We learned about the heart today," Josie said, skipping ahead of him. "Did you know it beats more than 100,000 times a day?" Caleb nodded, thinking of all the heartbeats that had passed since Sarah's had stopped. 182,500,000, give or take. The math was automatic now, a silent counting that never ceased. "And Mrs. Lee said my drawing was the best in class," Josie continued, unaware of her father's thoughts. "I drew our family, you, me, and Rufus." Rufus was the stuffed bear that had been with Josie since her first birthday, now missing an eye and sporting several amateur repair jobs courtesy of Caleb's inexpert sewing. The walk to the subway station was familiar, their footsteps in perfect sync. They passed the same landmarks, the Korean grocery with its bright fruit displays, the laundromat where the elderly Mr. Kwan always waved, the abandoned lot where wildflowers somehow persisted through the concrete cracks. Caleb had chosen this neighborhood after selling their suburban home. It was affordable, close to good schools, and, most importantly, far from the hospital where Sarah had died. The subway entrance loomed ahead, its fluorescent lights harsh against the deepening dusk. Josie gripped Caleb's hand tighter as they descended the stairs. She'd never liked crowds, and rush hour on the Blue Line meant they'd be standing most of the way. "Ticket check at the next station," the automated announcement chimed as they boarded. The car was packed, as expected. Caleb lifted Josie onto his hip, something he still did even though she was getting too big for it. She rested her head against his shoulder, her small fingers playing with the collar of his worn jacket. The familiar sway of the train, the background murmur of conversations, the occasional screech of metal on metal as they rounded corners. These were the rhythms of their Thursday afternoons. Caleb closed his eyes briefly, allowing himself a moment of weariness. That's when he heard it, a gasp, followed by a soft thud. His eyes snapped open. 3 seats away, a woman had slumped forward, one hand clutching her rounded belly, the other gripping the metal pole with white knuckles. Her face contorted in pain, beads of sweat forming along her hairline despite the car's chill. "Excuse me," Caleb said, already moving toward her, setting Josie down carefully. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The woman looked up, her eyes wide with fear. She shook her head, unable to speak through what Caleb immediately recognized as a contraction. Around them, passengers shifted uncomfortably, some pretending not to notice, others casting concerned glances before returning to their phones. "I think," the woman managed, her breath coming in short bursts. "I think the baby's coming. It's too early. I'm not due for—" Another contraction hit, cutting her words short. Caleb's training took over, muscle memory from years as a combat medic before he'd left the service to start a family. "I'm going to help you," he said, his voice steady. "I have medical training. What's your name?" "Meredith," she gasped. "Meredith Quinn." "Okay, Meredith. I'm Caleb. That's my daughter, Josie. I need you to focus on your breathing while I see what's happening." He looked up, addressing the crowd. "I need space. This woman is in labor." His authoritative tone, rarely used in civilian life, had an immediate effect. People stepped back, creating a small circle around them. An elderly woman offered her seat cushion, which Caleb gratefully accepted. "Josie," he called to his daughter, who stood frozen, watching with wide eyes. "Come here, sweetie. I need your help." Josie approached cautiously, her fear giving way to curiosity. "Remember how we practice for emergencies?" Caleb said, maintaining eye contact with Meredith while speaking to his daughter. "I need you to be my assistant. Can you hold the lady's hand and tell her to breathe like we do in our counting game?" Josie nodded solemnly, taking Meredith's trembling hand in both of hers. "You have to breathe in for 4 counts, then out for 4, she instructed, her childish voice somehow soothing in the chaos. "Like this, see? 1, 2, 3, 4. Caleb quickly assessed the situation. The contractions were coming too quickly, and from Meredith's reactions, he could tell the baby was well on its way. The train lurched to a stop, and he made a split-second decision. "Conductor," he called out, "we need medical assistance, woman in labor." But the doors closed, and the train resumed its journey. The next stop was 7 minutes away. "The baby's not waiting," Meredith whispered, her face pale. "I can feel it." Caleb removed his jacket, spreading it on the floor. "I'm going to help you lie down," he said, his hands gentle but firm as he guided her. "Josie, keep holding her hand. That's my brave girl." A businessman reluctantly offered his briefcase as a pillow. A college student handed over an unopened bottle of water. A nurse, coming off a 12-hour shift, pushed through the crowd to kneel beside Caleb. "Labor and delivery, 5 years," she said by way of introduction. "What can I do?" "Help me keep her calm and monitor contractions," Caleb replied, grateful for the reinforcement. The baby's crowning. Time seemed to compress in the swaying car. Meredith's cries mingled with the train's rhythmic clacking. Josie counted breaths steadily, her small face a picture of concentration. Caleb's world narrowed to the task at hand. Gentle encouragement, careful guidance, hands steadied despite the train's motion. "A more push," he urged, as the train began to slow for the next station. "You're doing great, Meredith. One more." With a final, powerful effort, Meredith pushed, and in that moment a new life entered the world. Messy, loud, and perfect. A boy, his angry cries filling the subway car as Caleb quickly wiped his face and wrapped him in a clean shirt offered by another passenger. "You have a son," Caleb said, placing the tiny bundle on Meredith's chest just as the doors opened at Park Street Station. The waiting paramedics rushed in, taking over with practiced efficiency. As they prepared to transfer Meredith and her newborn to a stretcher, she caught Caleb's hand. "Your name," she said, her voice weak but insistent. "Please, I need to thank you properly." But the paramedics were already moving, the crowd was shifting, and Josie was tugging at his hand, concerned about being late for her appointment. The moment slipped away. "It's okay," Caleb said, though Meredith likely couldn't hear him anymore. "You take care of that boy." As the crowd dispersed, conversations buzzing with excitement over the unexpected drama, Caleb noticed his khaki handkerchief had fallen beside where Meredith had lain. It was stained now, but the embroidered C. Monroe in the corner remained visible, a small piece of himself left behind with the woman whose life had briefly intersected with his. "There, Dad," Josie's voice pulled him back to the present. "Are we still going to the doctor?" Caleb nodded, guiding her through the station, his mind still processing what had just happened. Neither of them noticed the news crew arriving, alerted by tweets about the subway birth. Neither of them heard the whispers that the woman was Dr. Meredith Quinn, the renowned neurosurgeon whose groundbreaking work on pediatric brain trauma had been featured in medical journals around the world. By the time Caleb and Josie emerged from the doctor's office an hour later, the story was already trending. But they simply walked to the diner as planned, ordered their usual meatloaf special for Josie, meatloaf special for Caleb, and continued their Thursday routine, unaware that anything had changed. 3 weeks later, the sleek black Audi pulling into his potholed parking lot looked as out of place as a swan in a mud puddle. Caleb was underneath Mrs. Rodriguez's ancient Honda when he heard the car door close. "Excuse me," a woman's voice called. "I'm looking for C. Monroe." Caleb slid out from under the car, wiping his hands on his coveralls before looking up. Recognition hit him immediately. The woman from the subway. Though now she looked completely different. Her hair was neatly styled, her coat expensive, her bearing confident. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. "You're a hard man to find," she said, a smile softening her professional demeanor. "The handkerchief only gave me a last name, and there are quite a few Monroes in the city." "You found me," he said simply. "I did, with some help from security camera footage and a very determined assistant." She shifted the bundle in her arms. "I wanted to thank you properly. And I wanted you to meet Benjamin. Benji. That's what I've been calling him." She stepped forward, tilting the blanket so Caleb could see the sleeping infant's face. Something tightened in Caleb's chest. That instinctive response to new life, to potential, to beginnings. "Is beautiful," Caleb said. "Healthy?" "Perfect. 5 pounds, 7 ounces. Small but fighting." She looked at Caleb with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You knew exactly what to do. Were you a doctor before?" She gestured at the garage. "Combat medic. 2 tours. Nothing as miraculous as bringing life into the world. Mostly the opposite." He paused. "But we had training for everything." "Dr. Meredith Quinn," she said, extending her free hand. "Neurosurgery at Boston Memorial." The name registered faintly. He'd seen it perhaps in a newspaper, heard it mentioned on local news. A doctor, of course. "Caleb Monroe," he replied, gesturing at his grease-stained hands apologetically, rather than taking hers. "Just Caleb is fine." "Would you like to come in? It's not much, but it's warm." Caleb gestured toward the small office attached to the garage. "I can make coffee." Meredith nodded, following him into the cramped space that served as both office and break room. Photos of Josie at various ages were taped haphazardly to the wall. Josie on her first bike, Josie losing her front tooth, Josie holding up a science fair ribbon. "Getting better," she said. "Your daughter?" Meredith asked, nodding toward the photos as she settled carefully onto the couch, adjusting Benji in her arms. "Josie, she's 7. Caleb busied himself with the coffee maker. "She was amazing that day on the subway. Usually shy around strangers, but she stepped right up." "She was incredible," Meredith agreed, "counting breaths with me when I thought I might pass out from the pain." She looked down at Benji. "I keep thinking about what might have happened if you two hadn't been there." Caleb shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Someone would have helped." "No," Meredith said firmly. "You didn't see what I saw. People backed away, looked at their phones, pretended it wasn't happening." Her voice took on an edge. "I've worked in emergency medicine. I know how people freeze." "You didn't. The coffee maker gurgled, filling the silence with its familiar sound. Caleb poured 2 mugs, handed one to Meredith, then sat in the desk chair across from her. "Why a mechanic?" she asked suddenly. "With your medical training?" "It's complicated." Caleb sipped his coffee. his eyes drifting to a photo not displayed on the wall, the one in his desk drawer of Sarah, laughing in the summer sun, unaware of the blood clot forming that would take her 6 weeks later. I lost my wife. Medical error. After that, I couldn't. Understanding dawned in Meredith's eyes. I'm sorry, she said. And unlike the many condolences he'd received over the years, hers seemed to carry the weight of someone who understood professional failure, who had perhaps witnessed similar tragedies from the other side. It was a long time ago, Caleb replied, though they both knew 5 years wasn't long at all. Benji stirred in his mother's arms, tiny fists waving. His eyes opened, that unfocused newborn gaze trying to make sense of shapes and light. Well, has your eyes, Caleb observed. And hopefully his father's common sense, Meredith said with a wry smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Though given that Michael decided fatherhood wasn't for him 2 months into my pregnancy, that may be too much to hope for. The statement hung in the air, neither an invitation for sympathy nor a bid for connection, simply a fact shared between two adults who had both weathered abandonment in different forms. His loss, Caleb said finally. Meredith looked up, surprised by the simple statement. Then she laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it did Caleb. Yes, she agreed. His loss entirely. The tension in the small office eased. When the garage door creaked open an hour later, announcing Josie's return from school, it felt almost natural, as if this impromptu coffee between strangers was a regular occurrence. Dad? Josie called, her footsteps light on the concrete floor. Mrs. Kwan gave me almond cookies again. She says I'm still too. She stopped short in the office doorway, her eyes widening at the sight of Meredith and the baby. Josie, Caleb said, this is Dr. Quinn and her son Benji, from the subway. Recognition transformed Josie's face. The subway baby, she exclaimed, approaching cautiously. He's so tiny. Would you like to hold him? Meredith asked, already shifting forward. Josie looked to her father for permission. At his nod, she carefully set down her backpack and perched on the couch beside Meredith, arms positioned exactly as Caleb had once shown her with a neighbor's infant. Support his head, Meredith instructed, transferring Benji with the practiced ease of a medical professional. That's perfect. Josie's face was solemn with responsibility as she cradled the newborn. Hello, Benji, she whispered. I'm Josie. I helped when you were born. Something shifted in that moment. A connection formed, invisible but undeniable. Caleb saw it in the gentle way Josie stroked Benji's cheek, in the protective posture of her small shoulders. Meredith saw it too, her eyes meeting Caleb's over the children's heads. A silent understanding passed between them. This moment mattered, though neither could have explained exactly why. We're having pizza for dinner, Josie announced. Tuesday's pizza night. You could stay if you want. The guileless invitation hung in the air. Caleb started to form a polite excuse to save Meredith from having to decline, but she spoke first. I'd like that, she said softly, if it's all right with your dad. And somehow it was. That night in their small apartment, they shared pizza while Benji slept in a makeshift bassinet. They talked about everything and nothing. Josie's science project, the classic car Caleb was restoring in his spare time, Meredith's plans after maternity leave. It felt ordinary, it felt right. What began as a courtesy call transformed gradually into something neither of them had anticipated. Coffee at his garage became lunch at the diner, weekend afternoons at the park where Josie pushed Benji's stroller with determined concentration. They were careful, both of them, to maintain the fiction that this was about the children. Josie's attachment to Benji, Benji's need for positive male influence. 2 months into this undefined relationship, Meredith extended an invitation that changed everything. Arter's Market? I'm hosting a small gathering, she said, as they watched Josie help Benji grasp a plush toy. To celebrate Benji's first months and my return to surgery. Just colleagues, a few friends, nothing fancy. The hesitation in her voice belied the casual description. I'd like you and Josie to come. Caleb looked up from the stroller he was adjusting. Us. Of course, Meredith said, a faint flush coloring her cheeks. Benji wouldn't understand if his two favorite people weren't there. We'll be there, he said simply. On Saturday evening, Caleb stood before his bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of his only dress shirt, white, slightly yellowed at the edges from infrequent use. Josie sat on his bed, already dressed in her Christmas dress, though it was only October, swinging her feet as she watched him struggle with a tie he hadn't worn since Sarah's funeral. "Do I look okay?" he asked, more to himself than to his daughter. "You look handsome," Josie declared with the absolute confidence of a 7-year-old. "Like a prince in the books." Caleb smiled, giving up on the tie and leaving it hanging loose around his neck. "And you look beautiful, Jojo, like a princess." "I'm not a princess," she corrected seriously. "I'm a scientist who's going to help babies like Benji." The declaration caught him off guard. "Is that what you want to be, a doctor?" Josie nodded. "Like Dr. Quinn, she helps people's brains when they're sick. I want to help babies." Meredith's home was in a historic brownstone in Back Bay, its elegant facade illuminated by tasteful landscape lighting. The door opened before they could ring the bell, revealing Meredith in a simple black dress, her hair swept up elegantly. "You came," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I was afraid you might change your mind." "We brought cookies," Josie announced, holding up a Tupperware container. "Dad and I made them this morning." "That's very thoughtful," Meredith said, kneeling to accept the gift at Josie's level. "Benji's in the living room with my friend Anna. He's been fussy all day. I think he was waiting for you." Josie needed no further encouragement, darting past Meredith into the house, leaving the adults alone in the doorway. "You look," Caleb started, then faltered, unsure of the right word. "Different?" Meredith suggested with a self-conscious smile. "Beautiful," Caleb finished, "but yes, different too." "Your tie," she said, reaching for the loose ends hanging around his neck. "May I?" He nodded, standing still as her fingers worked deftly, completing the knot he'd abandoned. The moment stretched between them, laden with unspoken words. As Caleb followed her into the elegantly appointed living room, home was the last thing he felt. The space was immaculate, filled with artwork that probably cost more than his annual income, furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. And the people? A dozen or so guests in expensive attire, holding wine glasses and engaging in conversations punctuated with knowing laughter. What followed was a blur of names and titles. Department heads, attending physicians, a hospital board member. Each greeting was polite but tinged with an unspoken question. Who is this man and why is he here? Caleb answered their inquiries about his work with brief responses, watching their interest fade when they learned he was just a mechanic. He excused himself after 15 minutes of increasingly strained conversation, retreating to the corner, where Josie was still captivated by Benji. The baby had grown so much in 2 months, his features becoming more defined, his gaze more focused. "So you're the subway hero," a voice said beside him. Caleb turned to find a man in his 40s, martini in hand, eyeing him with undisguised curiosity. "Marcus Chen, cardiothoracic. Meredith and I were residents together." "Caleb Monroe," he replied, shifting Benji to extend a hand. "And I'm not a hero, just happened to be there." "Modest, too," Marcus said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Meredith speaks highly of you. Says you were a medic?" "2 tours. Afghanistan, mostly." "Ah, and now you fix cars, is it? Quite a change of pace." The condescension was subtle but unmistakable. Before Caleb could respond, another voice joined the conversation, a woman with sharp features and sharper eyes. "Fascinating career trajectory," she said. "From saving lives to changing oil. Was medicine simply too challenging?" Benji stirred against Caleb's chest, sensing the tension in his body. Across the room, Josie was now sampling appetizers, chatting animatedly with an elderly couple who seemed charmed by her enthusiasm. "I find engines more honest," Caleb said quietly. "They don't pretend to be something they're not." The woman raised an eyebrow, about to respond when Marcus cut in. "I'm sure Meredith appreciates having someone practical in her life right now. Single motherhood can be so demanding, especially for someone with her responsibilities." "If you'll excuse me," Caleb said, his voice tight. "I should check on my daughter." "Is everything all right?" Meredith asked, appearing beside them, concern evident in her expression. "Fine," he said, too quickly. "Just a bit out of my element." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Marcus and Stephanie?" she said. "Not a question. I should have warned you about them. They're brilliant surgeons but terrible human beings." Despite himself, Caleb smiled at her candor. "I've faced worse in combat." "Let's get out of here," Meredith said suddenly. "This was a mistake, not having you here. That's the most right thing about tonight. But this whole event, it's not me. Not anymore." "It is you," Caleb corrected gently. "Part of you, the distinguished Dr. Quinn, pioneering neurosurgeon. That's real. So is the woman who sits on your garage couch drinking coffee from a chipped mug," she countered. "The woman who's learned to change diapers one-handed while eating cold pizza. The difference is," Caleb said, "that woman seems happy." The moment stretched between them, both aware of a threshold they were approaching. Then from inside came the sound of a baby's cry, breaking the spell. One Tuesday afternoon 2 months later, Josie had an episode at school. Her blood sugar dropped during gym class, and she was rushed to Boston Children's Hospital. By chance, Meredith was consulting there when the ambulance arrived. Caleb burst into the emergency department, wild-eyed and desperate. "My daughter, Josie Monroe. They brought her in by ambulance." "Mr. Monroe," a firm voice cut through his panic. He turned to find Meredith striding toward him, her white coat flapping. "Come with me." They reached a curtained bay where Josie lay small and pale on a gurney, an IV in her arm, monitors beeping steadily beside her. Her eyes fluttered open as Caleb approached. "Daddy?" Her voice was weak, confused. "I was running, and then the room went all funny." "I know, sweetie," Caleb said, taking her hand carefully. "You had a low blood sugar episode, but you're going to be okay." "Dr. Quinn helped me," Josie said, her gaze shifting to Meredith. "She was here when I got scared." Hours later, with Josie sleeping peacefully in a hospital bed they'd keep overnight for observation, Caleb and Meredith sat side by side in uncomfortable visitor chairs. "I can't lose her," he said quietly, staring at Josie's small form. "After Sarah, she's everything." "You're not going to lose her," Meredith replied, her voice gentle but firm. "Her diabetes is manageable, and you're the most capable father I've ever met." "Thank you," Caleb said, his voice rough with emotion. "For being there when she needed someone. When I couldn't be." "That's what we do, isn't it?" Meredith replied softly. "We're there for each other, for the children, for—" She hesitated, then finished, "for the people we love." The word was deliberate, an offering laid between them. Caleb looked up, meeting her eyes, seeing in them the same certainty he felt growing in his own heart. "Yes," he agreed simply. "That's what we do." Winter melted into spring. Benji's first birthday approached, marking nearly a year since that fateful day on the subway. Meredith insisted on hosting a small celebration in her backyard. "Just us," she said, "the 4 of us. That's all we need." The day dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the picnic they'd planned. Benji had finally succumbed to the excitement of the day, napping against Caleb's chest. Josie was carefully collecting acorns nearby, explaining her scientific classification system to herself in a whispered monologue. "I can't believe it's been a year," Meredith said softly, gazing at her son's sleeping face. "Sometimes it feels like that day on the subway was another lifetime, and sometimes it feels like yesterday." "The day everything changed," Caleb agreed. "For all of us." Meredith shifted closer, her shoulder touching his, her hand coming to rest lightly on Benji's back beside Caleb's. "I've been thinking about the future lately." "Oh?" Caleb tried to keep his tone casual, though his heart rate picked up. "I've been offered a position heading a new pediatric neurosurgery center," she said. "It's a joint venture between Boston Children's and Mass General. More administrative than surgical, more reasonable hours." "That sounds perfect for you," Caleb said, genuinely pleased for her. "Congratulations." "I've also been looking at houses," she said. "Outside the city. Something with a yard for the kids. Maybe—" She hesitated, then finished in a rush. Maybe a garage or workshop space. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. Meredith, I'm not asking for answers today, she said quickly. I'm just opening a door, suggesting a possibility. I've been thinking about the future too, Caleb admitted, about what it might look like for all of us. Meredith's hand found his, their fingers intertwining in what had become a familiar gesture of connection. And what do you see? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I see Benji's second birthday, and his third. I see Josie helping him learn to read. I see Sunday mornings and homework at the kitchen table and Christmas mornings. He paused, gathering courage. I see you, always you. Tears gathered in Meredith's eyes, but her smile was radiant. That's what I see too, she said. All of it. Josie looked up from her acorn project, watching them with a child's intuitive understanding of significant moments. Are we going to live together? She called across the yard, her directness cutting through adult hesitation. Because Benji needs his sister close by. That's me, she added, in case there was any confusion. Caleb and Meredith exchanged startled glances, then broke into laughter that startled Benji fully awake. He blinked up at them, confused by the sudden noise, then joined in with his own bubbly giggle. What do you think, little man? Caleb asked, lifting Benji to eye level. Would you like that? All of us together? Benji responded by grabbing Caleb's nose with surprising strength, an act that everyone took as enthusiastic agreement. I think that's settled then, Meredith said, leaning her head against Caleb's shoulder. By unanimous decision. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, they remained on the blanket, the four of them together, bound by choice rather than blood, by love rather than obligation. Caleb looked around at the tableau they'd created, this improbable family forged in a moment of crisis, strengthened through months of small kindnesses and shared meals, of bedtime stories and morning coffees. You didn't just help deliver Benji that day, Meredith said, her voice thick with emotion. You delivered me too. From a life that looked perfect on the outside but was hollow within. You showed me what matters. We found each other, Caleb said, encompassing all four of them in the statement. That's what matters. As darkness fell, they gathered their blanket and Benji's birthday gifts, making their way back into the house. Tomorrow would bring decisions about houses and schools, about blending lives and surnames, about the practical details of building a future together. But for tonight, they simply enjoyed the certainty that had grown between them, the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it as one. From the chaos of that subway car, from two broken stories, they had created something whole, something lasting, something like love. Not the dramatic, instant connection of fairy tales, but the slow-growing, deep-rooted love that comes from shared purpose and mutual respect, from seeing each other clearly and choosing to stay. The kind of love that builds families and futures, that strengthens through challenges rather than fracturing. The kind of love that lasts.